So I have memorized time zones. I can tell you what time it is in Sydney. I can tell you what time it is in London. We do end up with those as Zoom events just because getting the author here is hard. And the other benefit is that you can do multi-author events that would make no economic sense at all if you tried to bring everybody here. So we're doing an event for a Stephen King anthology, not with Stephen, but there are like 17 fabulous authors that have all signed up to do this on August 19th. I already know what we're doing in November. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. I do this just for fun. So this is actually a not-for-profit bookstore, which I enjoy very much. And since you are a group that may recognize the name, I'm married to a Rosenwald. So if you all are familiar with Julius Rosenwald and Sears and Roebuck and Lessing Rosenwald, who is a great bibliophile, my husband is named for his grandfather, Lessing. So he should be here today, but he's off in his St. Patrick's Day tie to have a shot in his knee at Mayo. So he sends his regrets, but I do wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day, even though, and I think it's great to do a cross-cultural event today, don't you? Right. However, here I am, not to be pinched. So, Patrick, did you have that live? Oh, well, I didn't. I thought I was just talking to you guys. I'm talking to the whole world. Damn. Okay. Well, anyway, so let me introduce to you Zibby Owens and her friend Zach, whose last name I am blanking out. Thank you. Hard name, right? Silverman. Anyway, and they're going to be doing a wonderful program for you. So I'm going to just go over here and be quiet. Thank you.
Is it on? Is it on? Okay. Wonderful.
Hello. Is this working? Great. All right.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Zach Silverman. I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. I work for Jewish National Fund. It is a national nonprofit that works to build urban development projects in Israel in order to assist with the cost of living crisis. But I am here with Zibby Owens. Zibby and I met the last time that she was here. She was kind enough to ask me to help with this event. And so I will send it over to Zibby to introduce herself and, of course, why we're all here on Being Jewish Now.
Well, thank you, Zach. Thank you, Barbara, who's gone. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to all of you for coming. I'm so excited by this turnout in the middle of the day, so thank you very much for all of your time. I have some special guests in the audience today. I have not only my mom and my husband, but 3 of my 4 kids are here. They're hiding in the stacks they're reading, but if you see some younger people, that's them. So thanks to everybody for coming. I'm also really excited Zach is here. Zach is a big deal on TikTok and other platforms, and I was introduced by one of the contributors in this book to him, so that's fun too. By way of introduction, I changed my life at age 40. I got divorced. I got remarried. I went from being a stay-at-home mom of 4 kids and a Reform Jewish person to starting a podcast, which turned into event series, which turned into owning a bookstore, and turned into starting my own publishing house and doing book retreats and a book club, and most recently had me pivoting into Jewish content because I had a platform that I felt compelled to use. I feel like if you can, you must. And after October 7th, I did. And so that's how I ended up here. So that's a quick intro.
Amazing. Can you describe a little bit about what the genesis of On Being Jewish Now? Because there are a lot of different ways, obviously, to use your platform in order to help support Jewish voices and the Jewish cause. So what was it about this book and a type of book like an anthology series that you decided that was the best way to go forward?
So after October 7th, the first thing I did was post on social media. I'm on Instagram way too much, and it didn't occur to me not to post about it. I mean, I react to most things in the world through that. It's like my own mini column of sorts. And so I posted quickly thereafter in support of Israel and thinking of our everybody there, blah, 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 and immediately was met by so much online hatred. not only from strangers, but from people that I knew, from authors who had been on my podcast. People started unfollowing me. That was immediate, like the first week or so, and I was shocked. I wish I was still shocked by it, but now I'm sort of more used to it, but still it still is like a gut punch when somebody who I thought I was friends with all of a sudden posts a free Gaza something, and it just, I'm sure you've all experienced this. Well, whatever, for the Jewish people in the audience. And for the non-Jewish people in the audience, I'm particularly glad you're here because that is one of the reasons why I did this book. Anyway, I posted, then soon thereafter, I got review bombed, which means that people go on Goodreads and give you 1-star ratings, even though they haven't read your book. So that started happening, even though my novel at the time called Blank hadn't even come out yet. So it's not like they really didn't like it. I mean, I have a thin skin, but anyway, it couldn't have been about the book, and they had Zionist, racist all over it because of my 1 or 2 posts or whatever. And then something more public ended up happening, which is I like to support a lot of different literary organizations, a lot of organizations, but particularly in the literary space, because after I started my podcast in 2018, which is now called Totally Booked with Zibby, I have gotten to know many people in the literary world, because I've had over 2,000 authors on my podcast. So I was sponsoring the National Book Awards from the National Book Foundation, and we got word, this is now in November of 2 years ago, and I got word that there was some sort of activation happening, that all the finalists were going to say or do something pro-Palestinian at the award ceremony. So I called the organizer just to say, have you heard what's going on? And I called and said, have you heard about this? And they said, yes, we know there's something being planned, but we don't know what. I had heard that every finalist was going to get up and say a similar speech at every event, with every award. That's what I thought. That's what I heard. So they said they had no idea what it was. And I said, okay, well, if it is something anti-Semitic, what are you going to do about it? And they said nothing. And I said, well, what do you mean nothing? And they said, well, we believe in free speech. And I said, well, I also believe in free speech, but I don't believe in hate speech. So if there's something negative happening, what are you going to do? And they kept saying, we're not going to do anything. And I literally was like, okay, so someone could get up and say, we want to kill all the Jews, and you're not going to say anything? And they said, no. So I said, well, then I can't sponsor this event anymore. So I pulled my sponsorship, got the check back, and all of that. It became international news as like a symbol of the conflict in the U.S. literary world, which put to shame, like if I thought people were sending me online hatred before, this was a whole new level. It was just really, and it got picked up everywhere, which was in part good, because so many people also came out to, we can take a quick dance for the ringtone if anybody wants to, little intermezzo there. Actually, anyway. So it also sent me a lot of really amazing people my way who said, thank you so much, I'm glad you spoke out. And then as I was touring for Blank over the next year, people at events like this would come over and hug me and say, thank you so much for speaking out. And it was still early. There was so much fear and uncertainty and everything. And so I felt more and more compelled to keep helping, because I knew it was helping people in my own community. I was never like a Jewish activist of any kind. Like my work in the book world is for all authors. It still is. Like I don't prefer one religion or another. I'm sort of an equal opportunity book lover, and that's not how I judge my books. Like it's whatever I love. So this has been an interesting lane for me to sort of go into, even though I've been very proudly Jewish my whole life. So back to your question, I continued speaking out. I continued being on the front lines of all of the hatred in the publishing world. And because I came out so publicly for the National Book Foundation thing, a lot of bookstores decided not to carry the books I was publishing because I was a Jewish publisher, and they would even like email and tell me, or they would tell my authors. And so that was fun. And then after I had spent about a year not even a year, like 9 months or so, speaking out and writing in my own Substack about it and helping people, posting in stories, like just getting the word out. Because sometimes people didn't know when, say, a speaker had been disinvited from a book festival or something like that. Like I would, interview that person or give them the platform to tell their story. But it didn't make a difference. I felt like it wasn't making a difference at all. And no matter how many times I posted or wrote about it or whatever, I wasn't like changing anyone's minds. And I started feeling really just discouraged, right? There was another attack in Israel, and I was just like, this hasn't changed in thousands of years. Like, what makes me think I can take this on? But also, I joined forces with a couple other female authors who at first just wanted to do an auction to raise money to fight anti-Semitism. It turned into a 501c3 nonprofit called Artists Against Anti-Semitism, which is helmed by 30 women authors. And all of us have had this group chat in Instagram for the last year. And that's how I've heard of a lot more things that have just happened to me and that aren't reported in the press, even though they might be submitted. And in June, I thought, wait a minute, like I have to find a way to uplift our collective voices and tell all of our stories, not just my own. And that maybe if I joined forces with so many other amazing writers, we could get more attention. Maybe collectively we could change some minds or educate more people. And that maybe if we were to share our stories more broadly, we could reach people who were not Jewish, or maybe they hadn't met anyone who was Jewish, or maybe they only had heard one side of the story, but if they heard personal stories of things that have happened in people's lives that they would tell a close friend over coffee, that they would maybe change their minds or at least enhance their exposure. So I came up with this idea of an anthology. I had edited 2 anthologies during the pandemic. Moms Don't Have Time To, and Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. And those are all essays by authors who had been on my podcast about things inspired by parenting and what we didn't have time to do. So I knew how to do an anthology. And at this point, I had my own publishing company. We do fiction and memoir. And I thought, wait, I can just publish this myself. And at the least, I could get an ebook out really quickly, but I knew it had to come out by October 7th, the anniversary. So I reached out to all the women in the group chat. Then I reached out to more people. I said, you have like 2 or 3 weeks to write this essay, but we have to get it out fast. And like, apparently for published authors, it takes a lot longer to write an essay. Like I did an event like this for a Jewish day school, and one of the 4th graders was like, how long does it even take to write an essay? But for published authors, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this in 2 or 3 weeks. So anyway, I got 75 people to say yes, and 125 people said no. I hope that they're feeling sorry now that this book has been on the USA Today bestseller list for 14 weeks. But I got everybody together. We quickly put this into book form. I worked all summer on it, and we also produced an audiobook, which took a long time too, because everyone read their own submissions at home, emailed me the files. Like this was a very in the weeds type of project. And we decided to donate, well, from the outset, the goal was donating all the profits to Artists Against Anti-Semitism, which we're doing. So that's how it became an anthology. It's something I knew how to do. I had done before. I had the resources. I could not easily, time consuming, but I could do it. And I hoped that by reading and sharing stories, which is sort of my whole mission in life anyway, is increasing empathy and fostering community and connection through books, that this type of project would resonate and make a difference, at least to some people, to make them feel less alone. So that's how it came to be.
Well, thank you. Well, no, that's beautiful. No, I really.
Now the event is over.
No, I really. No, I really appreciate it because in some way I have a very similar story, and I'm I guess somewhat of an artist that got impacted at a very small level. A couple of years ago, I started to write a fantasy book. I just started to build a world, and then that became a story, and then that became a book, and I started to look into publishing. And I quickly learned that trying to get an agent in the publishing industry is, I think, harder than getting $1 million check from a venture capitalist. And I know that because I tried that too. And so I quickly learned that maybe the best way to go about it would be to go the self-publishing route. And so many people told me about or as I was learning, they said, start marketing your book before it's even finished. So I got onto TikTok and I started to get onto Book Talk because it's, been one of the things that's actually been a resurgence for the literary world, which is amazing. And so I started doing that. And about 6 months in or so, is about prior to October 7th is when I started. And at the time, I was very much interested in the whole concept around, non-white male authors, especially in the fantasy and sci-fi world. And so I had built some relationships and connections with people who were, had large audiences, both for, many reasons. And then October 7th happened. And immediately, I think on October 8th, 9th, and 10th, all of these people went out and started to say that Israel was committing a genocide and that they needed to support Palestinian authors and everything of the sort. And I reached out to them, and I've been a Jewish professional for almost my entire career, a large majority of it. I've been involved in the Jewish community and Jewish education for a long time. And so, I'm happy to do some of that unpaid labor that so many try to avoid. And I said, look, I'm Jewish. I'm very educated in this space, and I'm more than happy to have a real conversation with you. I sent this out to, I don't know, a dozen different people, and nobody responded. Or they did respond, and they said, don't worry about it, or no, or anything of the sort. And, I had been working really hard on this thing for a long time, and so I literally removed every single video I had. And just basically went private and said, I guess I don't know what to do right now. And previous experience had told me that things like this in Israel, blow over in a few weeks. And I said, okay, I'll just wait the few weeks. A few weeks had passed, and there was one particular video that just got me. And Twitter just was not giving me the type of catharsis, mostly because nobody responds on Twitter, or X now. And so I made a stitch to this video, and it went viral. And I had a very similar type of thing online of people saying, thank you so much for saying this, right on. And so I made more and more videos. And I got more and more people to reach out to me privately that just said, thank you. Just thank you. You say things the way that I can't. You articulate these things in a way that I don't know how. You're so educated about this. Thank you for speaking up. And, I've tried to be a content creator a few times, all of which has failed. And it just so happened that, during a time in which I have a wonderful job and I really do love it, but this seemed important. And probably the most interesting aspect about it was that the reason why I felt so tough about my particular fantasy book was because it was an allegory, or it remains an allegory for the Israel-Palestine conflict, which made it that much more difficult. So it's a Zionist who's writing a story that doesn't automatically create this oppressor type of dynamic, but rather creates a lot of nuance that says that everybody is the victim of this conflict, this victim of extremism. And that obviously wasn't wanted. They want the colonizer and the colonized. They want the oppressed and the oppressor. And so I didn't really know what to do. And so I kind of paused because I was I'm going to rewrite this and as a revenge story for my own catharsis. But then I actually decided to pause and say, that I'm literally doing what I'm trying to teach everybody. So for about 3 or 4 weeks, I waited, and then I started to write again and again. And lo and behold, I continued to write the story that I wanted to write while I got banned twice. I'm on my 3rd account now. And so now, I have a little over 31,000, or I guess almost 32,000 followers now on TikTok. And I've also started a Substack and an Instagram because people just keep saying that you got to say something.
Amazing. I had asked Zach to share his whole story too, because it's so important. And this is what is happening to so many people in so many fields, that if they see us speaking up at all, they're like, okay, you go. It's like there's this wellspring of support for anyone who is willing to use what they have to help in this public way. Not to say that other people are not helping. Many people are helping in many ways, but to be a public face of it, it can feel scary. And yet we feel compelled or comfortable enough to do it. There's a Columbia professor you've probably heard of. His name is Shai Davide. And he says, I'm not afraid to speak out. I speak out because I am afraid. And I feel like that resonates with me so much because it can feel terrifying. My daughter, who's here, not to call her out, but anyway, at one point there was one thing I was debating posting about that had happened that was so upsetting and that I knew would get a huge response. I ended up not doing that because I actually felt it would create some sort of personal risk. But when I discussed it with my family at dinner, and finally she said, "Can't someone else's mom do this?" And I was like, okay, fine. I won't share this one. But I think for everything, it's like we have to find our comfort level in what we can speak up about. But I do feel that anyone who can and is comfortable doing so feels this enormous pressure because we are such a tiny force, and all of the institutions and structures that are set up, particularly in the media right now, seem to be silencing the stories that we have to tell or presenting a very skewed narrative. And if you're interested in learning more, I'm actually, along with my husband Kyle, we're associate producers on a film called October 8, which is in theaters this week only. It's playing at Desert Ridge. We're going at 4:15. There's still a few seats left. But you should see it because it really it gives you the clear evidence that this was a coordinated, that it didn't just happen that there was more anti-Semitism on October 8th. This was a 20-year campaign by radical Islamic jihadists to infiltrate and try to bring down democracy. So anyway, that's such a light note for...
Also quite ironic because I thought that we controlled the media, but clearly we're doing a pretty poor job.
Yes, exactly.
But no, it's true. And, for the longest time, I, kept my identity as, secret as I possibly could. And only it was, I guess, about 6 months ago or so that I was doxxed. And because I wanted to, my wife works.
Maybe explain what doxing
Oh, yes.
is.
Doxing means that if you're on the internet and you hide your identity on the internet, doxing means that somebody has, without your consent, released your identity. So I was hosting a Jewish National Fund event back in September, and I went after the wrong, there was a particular creator who was, spreading some really bad disinformation, some really harmful disinformation. And so I decided to, correct him. And his response was to basically showcase to his 130,000 followers my identity and also tell them where my event was. And for the 24 to 48 hours or so, it was quite scary. I didn't know if what my job was going to say. I didn't know if somebody was going to find my address. My wife works for ASU Hillel, which is a Jewish organization that works with Jewish college students. So that was very scary. And I didn't know how many people might show up at this event. As it turned out, there were about 7, which should go to show you how, that was quite interesting. But yeah, for everybody out there, and, I think you made such a good point that, to me, it's really about doing any little bit that you can. So not everybody is going to be out on the internet or is going to put in the time and effort to put together a book like On Being Jewish Now. But even just sharing that extra thing on Instagram, the thing that you might be a little bit nervous about is somebody going to respond and say, oh, how could you share this, right? If somebody is, nervous about, sending something to a friend that says, hey, I know we talked about this a month ago, here's some new information. We're all nervous because of the implications, whether we might lose that friend, whether we might lose followers or anything of the sort. But even doing that little bit is what's helpful.
I mean, it's really mind-blowing, like from one day to the next, to feel a sense of complete security and not think twice about being Jewish in America. And then the next day be a massive target of so much hatred. It's like, how can you not be like, wait, no, like, how is this fair? I mean, it just felt, it still feels like at first it was just so shocking to be so hated by so many people. And, I like to think of myself as such a nice person. Like, I'm always trying to help people and help authors, and like none of it mattered. And I have to say it was quite depressing because it also felt like none of my work even mattered after a while. Like, is this really how everybody felt? And they just weren't saying it because they must have felt it if they were willing to publicly say it the next day.
I have a question for you because, you having living, in New York and in Los Angeles, 2 extreme hotbeds of progressivism. Did it feel even that much more shocking to you? Because I know it felt shocking to me as someone that, was in these spaces and felt like, I was an ally. Was it that much more shocking that it came from that side in such visceral way?
Yeah, I think it felt no matter where in the country you were, and we in New York had so many protests all the time. People were constantly getting caught up in protests. I had one time where I was doing a book event for blank in White Plains, like not too far outside of the city, and I was driving home, and it was when Netanyahu was in town for the UN General Assembly, and he was staying like near our house, not that near, but like almost a mile from our house. Anyway, a massive protest started going down outside our window, and I remember my kids just calling me terrified, like, what is going on? And police were arresting people, and they were shouting, and like just right out the window. It's not, so you can't, it didn't feel abstract. It was like in our face constantly. And anytime we went anywhere, it was like, oh no, we have to, change directions, protest. It's like it became part of every day. I mean, I joke about it, but and by the way, the essays in this book, which are by a whole range of different authors, different range of how religious they are, from someone who is converting to Judaism, someone who didn't even know she was Jewish until her parents revealed their history recently, Jewish people, rabbis. I mean, it runs the whole gamut. The stories are not about how it feels to be targeted or anything like that. They're really just about, a lot of them are about the joy of being Jewish, or what it even means to them, or some are about the aftermath and how this whole period has made them feel. But many are about, like, here's a story about, breakdancing at my son's bar mitzvah, or just what it means to live and breathe this culture today in America. But also we have essays from people in Australia and Israel and elsewhere. So it's the goal of the book, at least, is to give different perspectives, because Jewish people are divided on a lot of things anyway, which I think actually is holding us back in some way. But there's intense divisions in the U.S. over politics about what Israel is doing, whatever. But despite all that, I think everybody unites over the fact that this is like not cool.
Well, you even said that you were a Reformed Jewish, but now, so does that mean that you feel like you're not a Reformed Jew? Like, what does that mean?
Oh.
Where are you now?
No, I'm still Reformed.
Oh.
And for those who are not Jewish, that means like you do the least amount possible to still say you're but I'm joking. It doesn't really mean that. I mean, there are different levels of how observant in the religious faith and practice you are, but you can have the same level of identification culturally. I mean, being Jewish is a race as well as a religion, so it's one of those weird things. In fact, that was another one of these things that recently people are like, oh, no, you're no longer white. You are white pretending, or
white passing.
We're white
passing.
passing. Jewish people are now white passing Americans, but they're Jews. This is the new thing. I know, it's crazy. The whole thing is crazy. I'm like, okay.
You get to be whatever you want us to be.
Yeah. So, but anyway, in answer to your question, I think in New York, at least, and in LA, where I spend a ton of time too, it was very much in our face.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because some of the essays that I read were of people who had said that that they were surprised that by what was happening, and as I admit, I was too. But then I was kind of thinking back, and I now realize that we shouldn't have been. And I had just finished this book called Jerusalem, the Biography by Simon Sebag Montefiore, which is a really interesting book because he essentially makes Jerusalem, the city, the main character of this book. And then all of the people that are, we usually see as the main characters are side characters, as he goes through the life of Jerusalem from basically the start of Abraham all the way till 1967 at the end of the 6-Day War. And even before the Jews are finally removed by the Romans, there is a constant battle for Jerusalem, and there's this constant battle of, frankly, internal division of assimilationists versus traditionalists. But nonetheless, the same cycle happens over and over again, and we even talk about it as Jewish people in our communities about whether it's the Holocaust or the pogroms or the Spanish Inquisition or all of the other things. So we know that this cycle exists, and yet we were quite surprised this time around. And we always talk about every generation, and then we're all of a sudden very upset that, wait, my generation too? And so I guess, for me, I'm thinking a lot about why we were so surprised. And maybe it's because we were so focused on essentially what Nazi anti-Semitism looks like, white person marching boots. That's one of the imagery that somebody had mentioned, that we are looking at a very specific type and we somewhat ignored the others. And I guess, I don't know about you, but I don't know, what are you thinking about how it goes forward from here so that way the next generation isn't so surprised?
Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have been surprised. We collectively shouldn't, given our history, but we were in this sort of golden age of post-Holocaust false sense of security, right? And so I was very attuned and always on the lookout, as I learned in Hebrew school, and all these, are they changing the laws? Are there small things, like all the things that we were taught that had happened in Germany in the lead up to the Holocaust? Like, I was ready, and that's why when things are happening now, I'm like, this is one of these things, and that's why I feel like I have to shout it out. But I even I wrote a column for my business school newspaper, and in 2002, I wrote a whole essay about like, hey, look at what's happening. I can't believe all of this stuff. Like, we should all pay attention. And I'm like, why did I forget all of that? So in terms of the next generation, I actually think that with all of the issues and things happening on college campuses, they don't really have the luxury of forgetting. Like, they are actually, many of them are on the front lines, both on the front lines in Israel, in the IDF, with all of the young people who serve there, to the people sort of doing the corollary here in America, crossing the lines and dealing with so much on college campuses that I don't think they have a choice. And I met with this one rabbi when I was like, not that I'm not now, but I was determined that I would find a way to fight anti-Semitism better. And he's like, literally, we've been working on this for thousands of years. Like you're not going to solve this today. I think he thought I was nuts, but that's okay. But he was saying, in every generation, God sends a wake-up call. And this is it. And this is how it might feel bad, but this is how the next generation learns and knows to protect the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. It feels like bizarre, and that it couldn't happen in today's day and age, that these like biblical things are reoccurring. But I don't know. I mean, who really understands the universe? So maybe.
Well, I know for me, like so many people are becoming Jewish, or they're becoming more observant, or they're kind of like I always like to think about it from the perspective of like strengthening their connection to their identity, as opposed to necessarily like more or less Jewish, because I feel like so much of what we do that type of language can end up actually feeling very harmful, because if you go to Rosh Hashanah and you go to Yom and you participate in, which is our Jewish New Year, and you participate in Yom Kippur and you fast, and then you also, go to a community event for Sukkot, which is a festival in the fall, and then you light the menorah in the winter for Hanukkah, and then you celebrate Purim, and you put on a mask and you go to a carnival, and then you do a Seder for Passover. You've done a lot, and that doesn't matter whether you do it as a Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox Jew. There are different ways to honor each of those things, and there's some bare minimum rules you have to follow. But overall, the idea is that wherever you land in there, doing those things is all the same Judaism. And for me, I hope that people take that reactionary aspect of, okay, well, I'm going to be more observant, because of these people that hate me. And because that will falter over time, and instead say, no, actually, like, what is going to be the thing that keeps our people strong is a constant love for what it means to be Jewish. And so for me, one of the things that probably is the most different, or the thing that I do as kind of, I guess, a more observant Jew, is because I was a conservative Jew, so kind of like right there in the middle. But I started wrapping tefillin. So tefillin is this thing that goes around your arms, then you put it on your head if you ever see it, and that's when you have to, you do it like once a day for men. And I would do it here and there when it was kind of around me. I would do it a lot in Israel because again, it's around me a lot. But what was so interesting was, I've always been into meditation, and I thought to myself, well, instead of doing like a Buddhist meditation or like of an Eastern religion type of meditation, like we have meditation, Jews have meditation, and it's called, prayer. And so I wrap the fill in, try to every single morning. And, I say a few prayers. It takes me about 10, 15 minutes. And that's the next step. And so I hope that Jews everywhere go from this kind of reactionary thing to a love for our tradition, is what I would say.
And actually, that is one of the things the rabbi told me that day when I was feeling a little bit desperate. He was like, the goal is not to fight hate. The goal is to build love and to build pride and build community and all of that. And that is what you have to focus on. And so I feel like whether it's by adopting more things that make you feel more connected to it in some way, whether it's leading events or it's doing something like that, or making sure to light the Shabbat candles, or whatever it is that makes you feel connected, I think is the important part, and connecting the community too. I mean, I still feel like we're missing some sort of group email address or something, like, because I keep talking to so many groups, and I think that's why groups come together around this book so much, is people just want to know, like, what next? Like, what are we supposed to do? And how do we connect? And I spoke to some room in I think, Bedford, and I was like, before October 7th, like, none of you would be here at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. Like, and this event wouldn't be at this giant theater. It would have been like a small temple event, and maybe like 6 people would have shown up. But now it's so urgent because we feel we have something we need to protect and save. And, it's like we're fastening our seatbelts and driving the car, and we can't quite, get to cruise control quite yet. So,
well, and I think that goes back to the idea of like just doing every little bit that you can, right? That feels comfortable for you, because, whatever little thing you do next is going to be the thing that hopefully drives you to do more. There's a rabbi here, actually. His name is Rabbi Alush. He also has a very big following, by the way. And he told me that like the best metaphor for Judaism is it's kind of like going to the gym, where it's like, you go and you lift, and, you lift 10 pounds, and you're going to lift 10 pounds for a long time, and then you'll lift 20 pounds, and then so on and so forth. And, you might, hit your maximum for what you can, or you can do before you have to do that much more, and it'll be up to you, but to do that little bit. But it all starts with lifting that 10 pounder. And I think, I read so many things. A consistent theme I saw in so many essays was somebody that did just that little thing where somebody now, never wore jewelry that was Jewish, and now they say that their jewelry is very Jewy. They're wearing the Star of David and the hostage dog tag and everything. Somebody says, I'm wearing, I'm going to light Shabbat candles now. That's it, like you said. One in particular that points out to me, I can't remember who it was, but they said, they started off in COVID. They started off baking challah because now they had the time. And now that COVID is over, they're still baking challah, and they thought they were just doing it for their kids, and then they realized that it was actually doing it for themselves. And I think that that's a perfect encapsulation of what it means to be doing it for others versus at some point really internalizing doing it for yourself.
Yeah, I'm definitely started wearing a Jewish star after camp. I know there are many essays in here. They're like, oh, I had one from my bar mitzvah and I took it out of the drawer. I'm like, I didn't even have one. But now I have a couple, and I'm like very proud. And it's like it's different than in the Holocaust days where Jews were forced to wear a star, right? And it was sewed on. Now it's like, no. I am taking this. I am owning it. I am identifying myself, because unlike other races, you don't always know. In fact, I asked a lot of people, not a lot, but definitely several people to write for the anthology, and they're like, oh, I don't think I'm the right choice for this anthology. And I'm like, sorry, I thought you were Jewish. Anyway, no big deal. Anyway, but I think you're right. And I think also part of being Jewish is this whole notion of giving back and tikkun olam and tzedakah and all of these words that mean like giving back or charity or doing good for the world. And I think that alone and re-identifying sort of that as a Jewish trait, and that to be Jewish is not necessarily how often you go to temple. It's a way of living, and it's what God gave Moses in the 10 Commandments, right? These are the ways we live life, to be good people and to be looking out for other people, and that's who we are. And so I've never been more proud to say that I align with a certain group, because without my knowing, like, this is who I was anyway. This is like how I lived my life. And so it's just nice that sort of out in the mainstream and everyone can get behind being and doing good.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the Ten Commandments, because one of the central concepts of Judaism is this idea of mitzvah gerer mitzvah, which essentially means pay it forward. So a mitzvah is it's kind of a commandment, good deed. It's everything of the sort. And there's 613 of them, and you're not supposed to know all of them, but they can range obviously from very big, like don't murder, to something small and like giving tzedakah. And this idea of, or the idea behind it is that if you do as a mitzvah, it will inspire the next person to do a mitzvah. It's not necessarily unlike karma, where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this good in order to receive something. It's a matter of I'm doing good because it is good to do it. And that will inspire somebody, even if you don't know it, by opening the door for somebody says, oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. Now I'm in a little bit of a better mood. So then when they go and see somebody and, you know what, I'm going to give that little extra change. I can't believe I have, a quarter in my pocket. So I'm going to give it to that person. And all of a sudden and then that somebody behind you sees you and like, you know what, I'm going to give this $1 to that person, and so on and so forth. And it's this matter of, can you go to an event like this? Can you watch on YouTube? Can you engage just a little bit? And hopefully, can you share that extra post? And hopefully that will inspire somebody else to do a little bit more.
I'm pretty sure this was an insurance ad recently. Like somebody's at the Starbucks and then they pay, and it was like a car ad. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? No. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, it's that same thing that we all have to put good into the world. It's so important.
So then, what's kind of like, I guess, the next good thing for you? What's kind of like in this realm? Is there another one coming out, or what's the next thing?
We are actively strategizing on many different things that are coming. One thing that we did right when the book came out is start a Substack. And someone here has written, 2 people have written for the Substack. Three people have written for the Substack. Sorry, Mom. The Substack is the same assignment that I gave all the authors in the book, which is, what does it mean and how does it feel to be Jewish now? Nothing political, just what you would tell a friend and how you feel, and write a story only you could tell in 800 to 1,000 words. So we then open this up as like an assignment to anybody. So if any of you want to write, you don't even have to be Jewish. You could just write. And many people who are not Jewish have written for it as well. And we've had submissions from all over the world, including Amsterdam, before and after the events that happened there recently, and on all different topics. So we started that. We did a little accompanying podcast for a while. We're doing more events. So the 75 contributors and I all do events sort of all over the country, but we're starting these bigger events called On Being Jewish Now Live. And we have one in LA this coming Sunday. Is that the 23rd? Whatever, this Sunday. We have one in New York on April 5th, where we're doing sort of hours, not too many hours. One is 4 hours, one is like 6 hours, where we have multiple panels of people who are not necessarily just our contributors, but other Jewish thought leaders or authors or actors or whatever, talking about these issues, gathering. There's always like a lunch or a cocktails or something fun. There's a book fair. In one of them, we're screening October 8th, actually, the movie. So we're doing more of these, and we hope to take this model. Let's see how these first 2 go. But we've sold almost 200 tickets to our one this Sunday, so that's great. And we might try to get this to go sort of around the country in different cities as these bigger scale events. We are thinking, we have a social media on Being Jewish Now, a Substack on Being Jewish Now. I'm trying to figure out what to do with the many, many Jewish books I now get pitched to publish. For my publishing company, Zibby Publishing, we do 1 book a month in fiction or memoir. And I started that whole company because I didn't think authors were being treated the way as well as they should be, and that could I try and do it a little bit differently. And it's been really fun, and we've published probably, 30, 35 books at this point. But they're not Jewish themed books at all. We have a Jewish author or 2, but it's not like that. But now we're getting an influx of submissions for books. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with that. So stay tuned. And just other ways of elevating Jewish voices, right? So, co-producing, executive producing, associate producing, which basically means I did nothing, but it's fine. Getting behind other projects, not necessarily doing my own, but helping other projects, and also, I really like to give back, as I said, and with the fire in LA, I know we were just talking about this. We live part-time in the Palisades, and our home was spared because of firemen who came early on in the fire. But our whole community was devastated, and so I launched this whole big effort, and I started a clothing drive, and I got 30 high-end brands to donate clothes, and we raised money. In fact, if anybody is interested, we're just about there, but we are replacing all the books and all the school libraries that burned down, all through donations, which has been wonderful for the area schools. But at the beginning, it was like, oh, I'm doing this like giving stuff here. I'm doing the On Being Jewish stuff here. And I'm like, no, this giving stuff is exactly what it means to be Jewish. So I'm sort of looping in other ways to help communities in need, Jewish or not, because that is what it means to be Jewish. So we'll see.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Do you think maybe we should open this up for discussion? Patrick,
Yeah.
did you get my text?